Quite close to it. Oh, they hear me anyway.
Yes.
Sorry? Okay, are we all ready? I was getting around for not having got started earlier. And he's not listening to me. Can everyone hear me? So you can. So you can. Oh well, welcome all and thank you so much for coming out on such an awful night as tonight. You know, you all deserve medals, I think, and especially the ones who came from the West Side. You know, a special welcome to James Crawford and his wife Kate. We're delighted to see you here. I was looking back at the Communion 3 minutes earlier today because I knew it had been some time since James and I had been in touch, and this evening was first mooted, and it was in 2019. So I'm delighted that the night has finally arrived, and here we are. The other thing was the weather. When we decided on this day tonight, that was another thing, we decided late in March would be quite a good time. But at least there's no snow, so it's something, but didn't imagine a hurricane. Our title tonight, as you know, is Building the Crofters Memorials, and James had a huge involvement in the whole process of the planning and building of these, and included in these monuments is of course Gress monument. And in addition to that, a little bit more background on James. He's been involved, he was telling me, for 50 years in vernacular restoration all over Lewis and Harris. And these restorations included Black Houses, Norse Mills, the Iron Age house at Bosta, and many memorials too, I am told. And interestingly, he spent 10 years recording all the archaeological features of the uninhabited islands of Loch Rogue. And you really found that fascinating, you enjoyed that. So, there's nothing else left for me to say but to introduce James and we can get going. And seriously, is this loud enough? Yeah. Thank you, James.
Okay. Right, I apologise for having to sit, but I do have a bit of a dodgy back caused a bit by this process that we're going to be talking about. And good evening and thanks for coming out on a very vile night. And hopefully going to give you some insight into the building, the cairns down by Aiginish, or CNGs, I'll say. But they weren't the first. This is the Upper Call cairn that was done before any of the ones down by CNG came along. It came in for a bit of a stick from one or two individuals in Aiginish was lacking certain features, but in my opinion it's very, very good, and it's it was the very, very first. The two communities that didn't get involved in the building the cairns by CNG were Upper Call and also the Berner. Berner were the very first to rebel against the conditions that were being handed out on the island, and one that I was very much aware of, in fact, through my association over many years with my wife's family. And one of the things I remember going into was second-hand books when Catherine was working for the Inland Revenue in Edinburgh, and buying books. And one day I remember picking up this book off the shelves in Grants of the Mound, and it was the Lord of the Isles on Leverhulme. And I remember actually being delighted to find it was a signed copy by Nigel Nicholson, and it was only 17 and 6. And it was straight up to the desk and paid for it, only to be called back by the manageress and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, but that book shouldn't have been on the shelf. It's to be repriced because it's a signed copy." And I says, "Well, I'm sorry, but I've got a receipt for it," and off I disappeared off to read about Lord Leverhulme. So, well aware, I'm not going to speak about anything to do with the conditions, except I was very much aware of what had been handed out over the centuries in the islands. Strange enough, I recently almost concluded history of my hometown of Melrose, that I'll speak about briefly later on. Almost had parallel situations 100 years before, but of course it was never really covered in history as the later clearances in the Highlands, in particular the Highlands, were. But it was amazing at the clearance of run rig and forcing people into the industrialised process and what it led to, and estates being formed by people and clearing the people from the Melrose. One particular street, the Abbey Street, or the Bow, as it was known locally, was cleared completely of people to create an estate. But anyway, on to the monuments. Call was our very first, and the concept these were done by Will MacLean of Tayport Fife. The concept for Bernera was never accepted by the Bernera people, and they went on to build their own. There was a suspicion that it was too artistically led, and they saw they were just going to be, subverted and pushed aside, which in some cases it did happen. But it was led, the next one, Kate, by Angus Ease, who I got to know very well. He was very much motivated to get these cairns constructed and carried out, and but he came along slightly later. Will MacLean had produced the artistic images for Balallan, Gress and Aiginish and Bernera. The Bernera people did not like it. It looked like a peat stack with bars, a window with bars in it, and they just didn't like it, and they wouldn't accept it and refused to get involved. So the plans that were produced by Will MacLean were really just artists' impressions of what he would like to see. And I started off in this project by being approached by Amat Bruce of CNG, and he had actually attempted to produce plans based on Will's drawings, which are really quite good for an architectural point of view, but lacked actually clarity on a technical side and also a structural side. And he had remembered that I had become involved in Lewis by restoring a black house in Callanish, and pointed this out and said, would I be interested in coming along to build these cairns? And I said, well, no, not really, because my wife and I are just going off on a new venture. We've invested capital, we've invested a lot of time, and we're getting underway with this, and I really just don't have time. But if I can help, I'll certainly do so, and I'll meet you and discuss anything I can help you with. So that's what happened. I turned up at Babel at Garibust one day. Was it Garibust Matt lives in? Can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter, in point. And I was really, quite frankly, surprised that they were actually running with this project, because I thought the costs would be horrendous. Technically, the plans produced were really not terrible, particularly one, Gress, down the road. Pointed this out to Matt. I said, Gress is impossible to build. Now, I think, where's Mr. Murray? I think this I think this Roddy did these, in fact, for Will McLean, for the, this is Dylan, and the next one, Kate. And this was what was proposed by Gress. Totally impossible to achieve. And I was really quite taken aback that they were even actually contemplating doing this. But Matt Bruce had actually worked on the plan, spent a lot of time, and the next one, Kate. And this is Balallan, followed by the should be, and this is the one for Gress, what was proposed for Gress, and also the final one for Aiginish. Technically achievable, Balallan was achievable, but not in the manner that was proposed from Matt's, but he'd done a fairly good architectural attempt to do so. Anyway, I said, frankly, I don't think you've got the money to do this. You haven't got the skill base, because remember, in early 90s, the level of skill in Lewis and Harris had dropped off to a point where it hardly existed. There was no one within skills that had been inherently in the people up until certainly, I would say, about the 60s. But then it just dropped off. That there was very little skill base in stonework, and really, as I pointed out, you know, it was going to be a very, very difficult task. Plus the fact the costs were just going to be horrendous. Now the next one, Kate. This is what Aiginish. I don't have the other two for. Well, you saw what Matt had produced. It was very similar and done in a similar fashion to this that Will had done for Aiginish. And next one, Kate. Now, and the next one, that's Gress, and also Aiginish, and then Balallan. You may see these up in the castle. They actually were done in 1998 in the castle, and in an exhibition in Lanter. They were actually expressed as being done in 1993, and they were not done in 1993. They were done in 98 after the whole project was at an end. And it's been a bit of a contention between Will McLean and I that in fact he's not been honest about that these were for the project. They were never for the project. Now, it would be several weeks before, after the meeting with Matt, that a call came from Angus Ease MacLeod and asked if I'd go in and see him, which I did. Anyway, I was mightily impressed with his passion to the project, but pointed out to him again the difficulties he would get from the design and the costs and the availability of labour to do it, because for by one person from Harris who said he could do it, frankly, there was no one else in the field. And I was not inclined to get involved. But after I left Angus, I must admit I resolved to try and get to do as much as I possibly could. and help in any way I could. And somehow or other, it began to form in my head that, frankly, if these were going to get built, and frankly, I really felt passionate about the land struggle in the islands, because it was just extremely bad. And I thought, this has got to happen. And I suppose I knew then that if it was going to happen somehow or other, I had to come involved, because frankly, there was no one actually around that was really seemed to have the credibility to be able to do so. And from what I can gather from Angus and others, in fact, there just was no one they could get except this one lad from Harris who said he could do it. But I knew what they were talking about. If they could be interpreted properly, they were going to still be very, very difficult to do. Now, what I said to Matt and what I said to Angus, you will have to employ a structural engineer to assess and produce drawings that will be able for these to be built, because what you've got just now is something that's unattainable with these drawings. So you'll have to get a structural engineer. Well, that's the case. For several weeks went by, and we got nowhere. Well, they got nowhere with it. And anyway, Angus phoned up one day. Oh, we've got the very lad. I said, oh, very good, yeah. So he told me the fellow's name. I won't say who it was. The architect. I said, Angus is an architect. Sorry, greatest respect for architects, but structurally they do not have the background to give you the assessment, because remember, you're going to put these up in situations that's extreme. One at Balallan, with that valley, the glen coming up, I said it's going to be exposed. The other one at Aiginish, I said, is really on the Bry. I said, you know what goes on there. I said, the only one that won't be subjected to any degree is possibly Gress, but they will have to be assessed properly. And what you've proposed up to now is just unattainable. Well, that went on for another few weeks. And then one day, Kate and I were going into Lantern for coffee, and who comes down the steps but Angus? His face told the story. How's things, Angus? Bad. He says, I've just been up seeing Roddy Murray, and we've not been able to get a structural engineer to come on board. And he says, the project's at an end. I says, well, could I maybe make a suggestion here? Perhaps there's someone that could help you. And his name's John Norgrove, and he's an engineer with the council. I says, he's not a structural engineer, but I know him by repute because of what he's done in Ireland, and he understands the island, he understands the environment, these structures have to exist in. And I said, you should maybe have a wee word with him and see if he could help. Well, he came back on the phone 2 or 3 days later to say, I met John Norgrove and he's prepared to come on board. And he says, how do you feel about that? I says, well, I think that's a good move, and that's pretty good. I think you should be able to move the project along and see where you get from there. Are you definitely going to become involved? And it's one of these decisions you make, in life that somehow, with hindsight, you wish the hell you had. Because frankly it became almost a nightmare. So that's it. John, the next one, Kate. Oh, right, I'm jumping the gun here. What about my background? Because some of you will have seen the things, local stonemason James Crawford. Well, I was never considered myself, and my family never considered myself a Jew. And not only that, I wasn't local, and I'm not a stonemason either. A confession there. But I was portrayed from this point forward as the local stonemason. But what is my background? Well, I'm from Melrose, borderer, and here I am, aged about 3, 4, and even then I was historically minded. I remember well, and this is maybe some of the things I'll digress a wee bit with. Shortly after this, my father, who had bought a stables and converted it into a family home and also business premises, was contacted by a James Richardson of the Historic Ministry of Works. He was inspector for the area, and he came to my father because my father had removed the sundial in the stables, and he wanted to know what it was so it could be repositioned somewhere else. And anyway, my father hadn't a clue what it was, and anyway, I put my hand up and said, but, be quiet, James. And, but, be quiet, James, you know. And so anyway, he concluded his conversation with Mr. Richardson, and they then said to me, I got a scolding for interrupting adults. I says, but you don't know what it is. He didn't know what it is. I know what it is. You know, I was just, even at that early age, I was involved in history, and it was all I really wanted to do. My father, he was quite taken aback when I said I certainly didn't want to go into the family business, and I didn't want to train as a stonemason. What do you want to do? History. That's all that really interests me. History. He says, you'll starve. I says, well, that's what I want to do. Well, in these days, he didn't argue with family. He just did as you were told. And I went into the family business, and I spent 2.5 years before my father and elder brother, John, decided that my knowledge of masonry and site work was adequate, and I would be go on to train, first of all, under an architect, then a quantity surveyor, and then an engineer, before I went into the family business and took over that side of the family business. But this is my family, my 2 elder sisters and mother and father, but behind is my inspiration, had been my inspiration in life from a very early age, and Melrose Abbey. The Melrose Abbey was built, the first one, 1136, second one from 1386, from when Richard II of England actually knocked the abbey down. It was rebuilt, and some of my ancestors actually were involved in the rebuilding. So anyway, there's my formative years, and they were influenced as well by the Hebrides, and family friends were from the Hebrides. A lot of my school friends were from Lewis. Ian MacLeod, the janitor, John MacLeod, he was from Tulstaghoolish, and Pop Morrison, my woodworking teacher, was from the Lewis as well, and lots of people in the town. But there was one instrumental, just say something. Some of you may have seen, this is a bit of nonsense on my part, on the Balallan cairn, that one, it signifies the Holy Trinity, the Father and Son and the Holy Ghost, and it's a Masonic mark of the main family, which some of my ancestors are, who were great masons in Melrose, and this was their mark. And I intended to use this in all the cairns, but it was only done in Balallan. Many people have actually asked what there's that at the top of the stairs beside the other numbers. Well, that's what it is, I mean, massive. The family came from Galloway, and it's actually from the Gaelic, and because we have to remember that down in the southwest of Scotland, Gaelic survived for a very long time. But anyway, we move on to the next one, Kate. And The other Hebridean influence, it's not a great photograph and I apologise for that, but this is a Werner Kisling, who was ethnological researcher at Cambridge, a German, and he came round about the end of the 40s, and when I was going to school, every morning, hello, good morning, and of course he was rather strange because he was German. Of course the war had only finished 2 years before, but he wasn't involved in it. He'd been interned in the Isle of Man, but released because of what he's done and what he went on to do. And the next one, Kate. And Werner went on to produce this and lived in Eriskay for over a year. And he contributed greatly to the understanding of the black houses in the islands down there, and also he was in Lewis. But he found his reception in Lewis to be a lot less acceptable than what it was in the US. And I remember saying they were rather, because I was German, and there was a story told about him being in Babel near the school one day, and the children said, "Oh, here's the German spy coming," and the headmaster was rather intrigued, went out and accosted Werner, told him to come in, and 2 hours later the headmaster came back and to say he's not a spy, he's a German doctor who's researching the houses. Anyway, the next one, Kate, and not to be, and this is another paper he produced. But he did something in Melrose that I'm grateful. I'm deviating a little bit, I'm sorry for this, but we'll just go on and just to give you an idea the influences in my life and how I ended up in Lewis. This is Werner's photographs, and by the way, his mother was in St Kilda and is reputed to have taken the very first photographic images on St Kilda. But Werner was a world-class photographer. He was fantastic, a real eccentric, brought up in a castle, huge family funds, and this is him recording just at the Abbey entrance the demolition of one of the last thatch houses in Melrose. And we're very lucky we have this because, in fact, the construction methods are not that dissimilar to the Black House, just rough timbers, and Werner recorded these. Okay, Kate. And just to give you a little bit, because I know you're a historical society and maybe you'll go on to do something on this fellow, Oka Campbell of Sweden. James Shaw Grant informed me about this lad. He came in 1939 and he actually judged the second Carnival Queen in Stornoway and picked a girl from Tongue. Campbell was doing a survey on shillings in Lewis for the Irish Folklore Commission, paid for by then. And the connection between Werner and Oka is they met Oka with Kisling and Stuart Sanderson, that became the first secretary of the School of Scottish Studies, and a few others, Callum MacLean of Rassay, met up in Werner's hotel in Melrose with Campbell to discuss that there should be something set up in Edinburgh at the university, and the School of Scottish Studies, to cut a long story short, was one of the things that came out of that. Right, Kate. Right, we go up back to the Cairns, and this is John Norgrove's plan. John interpreted Will's basic design and came up with a plan that was workable. Next one, Kate. And this is the front, which you'll know is roughly, well, it is the shape of what we have today. The only difference is that the copes in the top were considered to be pretty awful, and it was reconstructed later after the cairn was finished and opened. Next one, Kate. And this is us setting up the Balallan cairn. That's Angus at the back, that's Ian Seamus, our son, setting up the central jig and on the cairn. And next one. And this is us inside. Ivor Murray of Ivor Murray's the engineers. I gave him the design I wanted for the jig that had to be done, and I spent about a week in 1993 setting off on our own buyer and setting off in a way that could be constructed, because it was quite a difficult shape to construct. And there had been the committee wanted it to be like a dry stone structure. Now the problem was we just didn't have the stone to build it. In fact, there was really, well, they'd been promised a lot of stone, but when it came to the bit, there was no stone offered, in fact. And we had a bit of a job. Angus very kindly came down and we spent a day going round lochs looking for sites, and then Angus had the idea of putting an advert in the Gazette looking for the stones, and there was several people, Mrs. Baird that had connections in Balallan, and Mr. King, another one. But Angus and I went round looking at the sites, and there was really very, very little. But one person he did take me into was a Hector Macaulay, an 82-year-old young person. He was an amazing gentleman, and he volunteered at an old quarters house, and he said, look, I've got that, you're welcome to it, and I see by the time you get started we might be able to get more. And it was virtually raking round. We went into every hole and corner trying to find stone, but in the end Mrs. Baird came across, Mr. King came across, and Mr. MacDonald. I've just recently found my diaries of that period and have their addresses now, so hopefully I maybe write it up a little bit more in detail and give credit where credit's due. But the person that stands out was Hector Macaulay, who was really immense. Not only that, he was so supportive and helpful, and went on to have many cups of tea with him, as I did with one or two other people in the progress of these cairns, and enjoyed his company and treasure his memory. But an extremely difficult environment to work in, because I realised to construct this you could rely on building this, because we were moving into the winter. We were getting into mid-autumn by the time really a proper start was made, and I knew that we had to get a shelter up to be able to construct this, because really it was done on a shoestring really financially, and we couldn't afford to waste any time. So this tent was that we purchased the scaffolding and put it up, and there were some days, and this is where I have to pay tribute to my son Ian, who worked with me for weeks without getting paid, and also Kate, my wife, because we'd started up the restaurant in Gurnahain, and it was actually really subsidising the building of this thing. And it not only that, it was, we had to work very, very long hours. And it was back and forth, but the thing that really was quite distressing was the noise inside this thing. On some days it was horrendous. In fact, I remember one time chasing Ian out. I didn't want him to risk being in there and the thing collapsing round about us, because it was feeling as if it was going to take off for the hills. And one day it did, in fact. When we came down one morning, we found that the whole place had been flattened with the wind, and for 2 weeks the wind was almost incessant, and we couldn't do anything about it until we had to rebuild the thing and repair everything. But anyway, progress was reasonably good. after we abandoned the so-called dry stone walling, because we didn't have any stone whatsoever to really to make a selection with, and that was a constant worry. And in the end, Bernard came to the rescue. I knew that we had to get some more stones, particularly what you call pinning stones, and I went round various places. We even went to Ness looking at stone, would you believe it? Angus came up with a place in Ness, a quarry that had been used in Ness and up to Ness. No use, Angus. And then who came to the rescue was one of the people that actually had been vociferous in not going down Will McLean proposal, Noreen McKeever of Crower, in particular her husband John J. John J. said, you know, he says there's a good bank of stone at the opposite Foster there in Little Bernard, but he says you're going to have to take it off by boat. Well, I said it has to, and that's it. So that's what we did. We ended up taking the pinning stones from there and some cut a lot of stone, and we got the lintels for the doorways, which was really quite a problem. But the fish farm at Crower, Cree Mackenzie's boys were very, very helpful in lifting stuff, and we got adequate stone across, and we managed to carry on and bring it to conclusion. But we had to use a mortar type of bedding to facilitate getting the thing done. Right. So we ended up, can you do the next one, Kate? Till that was 93. We started at the beginning of August. We'd been involved before that, but we physically started on the site on the beginning of August, and then by the end of January 94, we took the tent down, and Angus came down. But I met Will. Will came up on the 23rd. I think it was Roddy Murray again that came in one day and was sufficiently impressed that the water going back, and the next thing we knew, there was this photo call by the television people for the taking down of the protection, and Angus came down for it. And Sam Maynard did the directing with Finn McLeod, with the opinion that the other two would never get done, and frankly they just had to make the effort to get this done with Balallan. So that was what happened. But anyway, it became quite a success in various quarters, and the next thing I knew, there was a new proposal for Gress. There was a new plan for Gress. Could we get the next one, Kate? Oh, this is the committee meeting. Your brothers there, Roddy, and George Stewart, who I'll speak about later on, Susan McLennan, John M., the schoolmaster, Angus, Alison Nicholson, Alistair MacLeod of Lochs, Matt Bruce, Roddy Murray, and myself at the back. You'll notice that the top of the cairn now is quite different to what it is now. Right, next one, Kate. So this is the plan for Gress that came in next. Again, I thought, what the heck am I supposed to make with this, you know? It was to represent the people, upturned boats. The central pillar was to be Leverhulme himself, and you know, again, John Orgrove came to the rescue, and this is where I cannot actually adequately express my admiration for what John Orgrove did in all the projects. Without him, without his contribution, it would never have happened. Never mind my own, but John, with his capabilities and his contacts, really got the landscaping done, got so much done on the project through various means. I won't go into these, but he did. Without it, it would never have, these projects would never have happened. Excellent, Kate. This is John's amended plan from Wills showing the labour room, central pillar and the two. It's at this juncture that I realised that they had a real problem. When you calculate it out, there's actually 8 changes of angle in this structure, and to achieve that was going to be extremely difficult to do. And I said this to John, and anyway he took it back to the committee, and the word came back, look, we want this the same as you did at Balallan. We understand that, and we want that. Your proposal to use flat beach stones, what they didn't understand is the curvature is so difficult to achieve of this design that really you couldn't use normal masonry work, because in fact the time spent would have prohibited the thing being done. You've been talking about huge amount of time, huge amount of money, and frankly Louisian gneiss is extremely difficult. Louisian gneiss, as some of you may know, is 2.5 billion years old. It's a sedimentary rock that's been metamorphosed into what it is today, into Louisian gneiss, and extremely difficult to work. The most exemplary work there is in Ireland is at Stornoway Castle in the library dining room section, and it's executed in a manner that is absolutely fantastic for the type of stone it is. Beautifully done, and I recommend anybody go and see it. But very, very difficult to achieve, and of course it's only a multimillionaire that could achieve that degree of finish. And it was done because it sits above Sir James's bedroom, and he was also going to see it in Scobie, the Clacker Works, informed McNabb, the builder of Stornoway Castle, that it had to be exemplary, and it wasn't, and is exemplary work. It really is outstanding. But here we are. Oh, John, I says, do you think it's made of butter? Do you think cheese? So maybe we could just take a knife and scoop it away, and we come up with this. Well, the committee wants it the same as Balallan. Well, anyway, I think it was on the 4th of March of '94, I went to see John, and I said, John, there's only one way we can build Gress, and that's with flat beach stones. Where we can get them from, I don't know, but I said, unless we can, I said, you can't. So, anyway, I'll use my fishing rod. Oops, back to...
It's on the table.
Aye, I know, but the next plan. The next plan. Well, as you know, I'm going to point out, well, we've got Gress across here, but the stone for your monument came from here, from Kilisai, off Bernra. There's Bernavec and Kilisai over here. And the reason we got there, I actually made a tentative start on archaeological survey stuff on the islands. There's about 40 odd islands altogether in Loch Roag. And again, it was John J. McKeever, again, who actually thought, when I said to him about getting flat stones, you know, John, do you know? He says, well, there's 1 or 2 beaches. He says, there's a Duop as well, and he says, I'm sure there might be something there. But anyway, I went round to Kilisai, and it was apparent that there were plenty of stone. The trouble was the locusts, in fact. It's a hell of a long way from Gress. And next one, Kate. And anyway, just to give you an idea, this is the Golas in Bernard. That's Crore. Foster is down here, just in there, and this is Bernard. Now, this is Illingford Crow here, and this is the beach that the stones from Gress we obtained. Have to put them in bags and then transport them out round the sign, through this channel, through here, and this is where you had to be extremely careful with turning and going through this channel and up and through and into the slip. And this one in particular posed problems because right at the entrance is a rock called Ronach. It's Finlay MacLeod's wife, Norma. Her great-grandmother used to cut kelp on the rock at very low spring tides, but you had to be very careful going through at certain tides, particularly springers, and otherwise you're in problem. And the boat we had for doing this was an old army assault craft that we built in flotation chambers with polystyrene and used it for transporting the stone, picking all the stone, hand-picking the stone into bags, then into the boat, down a shingle beach and then out round to the slip at Crow and onwards to Gress. We took about approximately around about between 80 and 100 tonnes across to Gress in bags. We didn't need all of them, but you had to have a selection because it was extremely difficult to get the RS line. I maybe explained a little bit what an RS line is. Okay.
We've got accused of moving Werner.
Oh yes, there was a wag said, is he going to leave any of Werner behind when he's finished? The Calmean, called Murdo McLean. Okay. Yeah, sorry, these are not good photographs, but they'll do. This is looking for the Crow to the beach over in Kilisai. It's interesting, Kilisai means the churchyard is from the north, and the word Bernard's Kilisai is a bit anciently Kilisai, and it was connected with Little Bernard, and there was a very, very bad storm in the middle medieval period where it was actually the island that broke away from Little Bernard. And this is one of the Balallan in stored this one a few years before that, before 96. But there's 6 Balallan plus a blessing house on the island. So that's, that's just slightly that right-hand photograph is the beaches on Little Bernard. I'm sorry, it's a wee bit poor, but there we are. Okay. So, we've got the stone, we've got the plinth. John Algrove attended to all that through the council. They were very, very good to the project, and in a case that someone decided they knew how to make a church structure for controlling this. Unfortunately, as I said to them, I said, well, it's all very well. I said, do you know how many times I'm going to have to move this arm? I said, it's going to be moved hundreds of times. And I said, what are you proposing for me to do? To undo 8 bolts every time to move the arm, the travelling arm? If anybody's interested, I still have that travelling arm. I made it out of copper. So bent it into to be able to travel, and also a young lad in Aiginish made me up all the bits and pieces that I needed for it, Kenny Keever, and this was the thing that controlled the stone. Every stone that went on had to be checked for the RS line. And if I can just use this, the RS line on the stone is virtually the working face plane of the stone that you use, and you've got to just pick the stone and use that and check that it's doing, because if you didn't have that symmetry on the structure, and you see it in the finished one, it would look lumpy and bumpy and just terrible. So it had to be done very, very carefully. Now, I had got a rather steely look from a certain gentleman on the committee, George Stewart, at Balallan. George thought I was part of the artistic movement that was just plain daft and lacked common sense. And halfway through the first cairn, I had a visit from George, and he came in and he says, oh, this is all right. Oh yes, I quite like that, and I didn't think I would, you know. And he was quite honest. Well, I went on to get to know George well, and he was always extremely kind, extremely helpful, and helped whenever he could. And he then invited me up to the house and had many cups of tea with Mrs. MacLeod and him over this project completion, which it did, without the trauma, I must admit, of Balallan. Balallan was particularly terrible because, in fact, Ian and I gave it a name in the end, Stalag Balallan. It was just so awful. It was really, really dull. But anyway, Gress went forward and was completed at reasonable time, and this is the craft. Believe you me, you don't want to risk life and limb in this thing. I was just always glad it was packed full of polystyrene compartments to keep it afloat when we were putting on about 2 tons on the boat and bringing it in. They're not really good seaboats. Plus the fact it's ex-military, but someone at some time had cut the transom down, and there was times when we came round, there was about 2 inches to spare on the transom, and we had to make sure that the conditions were right, that we didn't have anything, otherwise we were swimming. Lucky enough, Kate and I had dived for scallops for about 5 years, so we were always quite prepared that if we were going to have to swim, the trouble is the stone would be lost, and that would be a tragedy. But anyway, they all came across, with the 2 exceptions, we got across without any trouble. So, unfortunately, I don't have too much inside because built on the mound, Gress was quite constrained trying to take photographs, so you could only get back a bit less than a metre. But that was just shortly before we started taking it down. And you maybe see then this Aris line, getting these stones out to what you call the Aris line to give this curvature and make it look regular. And there it is being stripped on the mound, and that's the excess stone that was left from the building of it. It went on to be used, but also we needed more for Aiginish, and but this is what was left over. But one interesting thing, I think you'll find interesting, was I was really quite intrigued with the type of sand you have at Memorial down there. I discovered that there's a huge lime content in it, much higher than what you get in most of the beaches. And like a bit of a reaver borderer, I kept on taking a few bags away because I was quite interested in using it for particular things. And I kept on digging down just to the left of the screen, and what do I find one Friday afternoon, I think it was. It's okay. Oh, sorry, but this is just a completion. This is a group that George, Alistair, Will MacLeod, Angus, me and John Norgrove at the after everything had been stripped down. Well, I should say one thing. The Leverhulme pillar was actually built with stone from Callanish, just below the Callanish stones. It was I was a bit stuck for getting stone for that, and Mr. Mackenzie said, well, I've got an old building there. If you could take the whole thing away, you could have the stone, and that's where it came from, just directly below the Kelnish stones. And I had the idea, the very top of the lever-hewn pillar is actually got a few smooth stones, and this was to represent Leverhume's top hat that he always wore. Right, good. This is what we found to the side in the sandbank that I was extracting an anchor stone. And as a historical society, I thought you'd be interested to see this, because it really is quite unique, and a bit more unique than I actually thought. Okay, great. Because on it is a copper alloy stain that seems to represents a chain or a rope of some kind or other from the copper, and the looks as though it's of some age. Now, one of the things I've done all my life, when I was in Mills as well in the family business, I used to make a pest of myself, going around looking at historic structures, historic anything, in fact, and anybody that had stones or anything that was of interest, I went round and pestered them. I remember ex-inspector MacDonald, I think it was, on the way in here at town, I remember having a look at his stones, and someone who's in the room tonight, of course, got a visit from me, in fact, as well. Next one, Kate. And I went to Gress Lodge, and made a pest of myself, and took photographs and recorded what I saw. Now, I was just a bit bemused about this, and you'll see if you can read it. It says, extremely worn, probably been found in the stream by your father, is it? Yes. And I didn't quite understand the stone for a wee while, but I was involved at Boster and doing the design, and also I knew the directors of the dig, and strangely enough, what did I find at Boster that gives us a date for this type? It's a quern stone that's been cut down to make a drogue anchor, like the Gress stone. And here's another one from Boster, and we have a date for this, 7th century. It was dated to the 7th century. Regrettably, like so much else that goes off to Edinburgh, it never came back. And this has been lost, together with massive amount of artefacts that the university, when its archaeological unit imploded, just seemed to disappear. Where, we don't know. But here's another one. It's a sea anchor. And I was at a conference at St Margaret's University in Musselburgh a few years ago. Wessex did a thing on sea anchors. And there's only 6 in the UK, and they're at St Abb's Head in Berwickshire. But here's another example of a sea anchor, and of course the Gress stone. Now, I believe you're in the process of trying to get a permanent building. I would like to get rid of the stone. If you wanted that anchor, you're very welcome to it. In fact, I've been always a wee bit neurotic about letting things go, because I've seen too much disappear into the ether, and I certainly don't want to see that, because it's quite a unique structure. Exactly what age it is, we don't know, but there we are. Okay. I'm not going to say too much about Aiginish. Aiginish was the last of the ones to be built. Again, quite difficult. Again, we had to go over to Bernra to bring more stone back. We brought it from Killisai, and we brought it from the Duob in the harbour. Angus came in one day just as we were finishing off. It's interesting that I'd actually found a piece of naive sandstone and we carved the very top of that one. That's on the point side. Angus came in one day and I took a photograph of him. He was getting a bit elderly by then, but he was pretty able. He got up there and we got a photograph of him right at the top. Okay. The last of the MacLean, it's not part of Cynnig is memorials, but it was done by Will MacLean, and the last of the memorials to the land raiders of Reef. And the archway that was done for that is based on incident from Baffin Island in Canada. It's the Inuit people's, direction passage into the unknown, or to the unknown, if you like to put it that way. And anyway, this is what we put to represent that. Will's design done by an Ian Smith, Dryston Diker, did the walls. I did as contracted to do the archway, and John Lawgrove, who was involved in this again, reckoned we wouldn't find stone because if they had been used for druidical circles, they were crushed by the ice that was here up until the 12th century, 12th millennium. Right. This is where the stones came from. On my survey in Breabeck, I actually saw one evening, I'd moved the boat in here, and we looked down, it was flat calm, and I saw the outline of stones. I thought, they look interesting, and looked at the beach, and I thought, right, next one, good. Now, down, and the interesting thing about this was a slip had been, a rough slip or revetment had been made, and these stones had been pulled down to be transported off to a stone site. And right, let's take the next one, Kate. And this is the largest one that was taken and used at Reef. But first of all, because it's covered in barnacles, we can get a date for this roughly, because we've got about a metre per millennium, and you can work out the tidal height, which is 5 metres to this site. You can get a date of about 3000 BC. Right. It came back to Gannahain to be cut and prepared and used at Reef Monument, and this is my granddaughter from Harris. She is she epitomises Catherine's grandfather in this video. She's got yellow hair the same, and she looks very Scandinavian. But anyway, the stone is prepared, cut, erected at Gannahain, and then taken across to Uig and erected there. Now, there was one problem that I found. The television people, because they're always looking for exposure of some kind or other, and they wanted to cover this, in fact, and I point blank refused, because I knew from a health and safety point of view, what I was attempting to do on the top of a hill, because we couldn't get a crane up to it, was virtually impossible. And I certainly didn't want the embarrassment of anything happening, and I refused to let the television company cover the thing. Now, but anyway, that was the end of the MacLean, though I believe he's got another one in progress actually up at Golson, and we'll wait and see what happens there. But anyway, quite good. So that brings me to the end of what we've got to say, and let me say that previous one on Beck was it was recorded and published in Discovery and Exhibition. I've always been very, very careful when you're doing these sort of things to make sure there's a record. Margaret and Ron Curtis of Ponting was rather upset with me taking them away and using them for the warehouse as well. They were initially delegated to go to a Standing Stone site. Well, they are now, Margaret. She didn't speak to me for quite a while over that, but anyway, that was it. Anyway, that's your Gress cairn in the beautiful spring sunshine, and it's my favourite, to be honest, of all of them.
It was just last week, changing the winds.
Yeah. It was my favourite. It was one that was the least troublesome to build. In more ways than one, because there was lots of carry on inside that committee that I just couldn't quite understand it. But Gress went off without a hitch, and I'm pretty pleased with it. In fact, I mean, it looks good, and it's been well maintained. So anyway, thanks for your time, and I hope you find it exciting.
Anna asked me to say a vote of thanks, but and I'll do so without any hesitation. But first of all, when I saw your introductory picture, I got the fright of my life.
Yeah.
Because I was the guy responsible for the alcohol cairn, and which wasn't part of the kind of Aiginish.
No, of course, no.
And I was also part of the original committee of Aiginish when I was editor of the Stornoway Gazette. But when I left the Stornoway Gazette, I certainly didn't get any invitations anymore, so I presume they felt I was of no use to them. But then, when the list of final cairns came out, ours wasn't there, the column wasn't there at all. So that's how ours was before anybody else, because we took it to the nose and said, if you're not going to do it, we'll do our own one. And I'm afraid it wasn't any of the artistic plans that you showed us here tonight that went to the others. It was the mask on a sand on a winter's night like this, and that was about it. Get on with it. The people contributed towards it. But it's just. But I was glad to hear that you didn't think it was too bad compared to the others.
I don't think it's. I mean, I'm speaking from the fact that I was trained in mason work, and of course I've observed it all my life and had hands-on, and I can understand who did it. I think it's good. I think it's adequate, and I think it's sensible. And the Berner people did exactly the same. They built a little pillar cairn, and it's adequate.
Well, I'm glad that is on record. Because coming from you, we would take that as a huge compliment, and thank you very much indeed. But having said that, the story you had for us here tonight was, well, it was illuminating in many ways, but most of us don't know much about it. And what I do know, however, and what I've heard so often is that Jim Crawford and John Norgrove never get the credit they deserve in relation to these. And I hope tonight that as part of the process in rectifying that, because without your knowledge, without your skills, these skills would not have been done. And we owe a huge gratitude to you, not just for the cairns, but for the many other things you have done in the island. And I remember one of them in particular being over in Berner on one, and I don't know if it's Top Hammond or something like that, but anyway, it's one of the places where they used to keep the lobsters before they set.
Oh yeah, Dublar. Yeah.
Which was it?
Dublar.
Yeah, well, it was. People don't see that, but the fantastic job Jim made of repairing that back to its original thing, so now you could actually put lobsters in there again and keep them, and the tide comes in, and then when it goes out, it keeps the fish inside. Fantastic work you've done over the year, and it's been just so interesting to hear what you've had here tonight. And I've also been told that there are other things you do towards the history of this island as well, and something to do with walks throughout the island. I don't know if there's any truth in that or not.
That's excellent. But walks. Well, yes, I've done a fair bit of walking in Ireland, but I've not published anything.
Oh, well, I'll speak to that, but my information is that they do have secrets in relation to paths that people used to walk and things like that. But anyway, I am sure.
Ah, yes, I know. Yeah, Alistair McIntosh, is it?
No.
No, through Alistair. Alistair's walked.
That's not my informant at all. But I think the best thing to do is that every one of us would have loads of questions, but it's probably best that we maybe ask the questions over a cup of tea or something like that. And, but on behalf of the commonality, can I sincerely thank you for what you have presented with us tonight. Highly educated, highly illustrative, and many thanks indeed.